Senator Tim Scott looked every Democrat in that room in the eye and said, "The rules are the rules. I'm not picking and choosing." That was at the start of the hearing. 1 hour later, he changed the rules. Not for everyone, just for his side. And when Senator Warren stood up and asked him one simple question, "What is the harm in letting us vote on 2 amendments?" He had no answer, just procedural fog, just chairman's discretion, just power dressed up as process. Law enforcement wanted a vote. Community banks wanted a vote. 2 minutes. That's all Warren asked for. He said no and couldn't tell you why. That's not bipartisanship. That's the rule book being rewritten in real time, right in front of the cameras.
About an hour ago, I received a request from a couple of Democrat members to add 5 amendments to make this a bipartisan outcome, and I've decided to do so.
So, Mr. Chairman, I object here. You cut 16 amendments from the members of this committee. We agreed, you said, nope, we got to our numbers and said, these are our numbers. And now, all of a sudden, you have decided to rule back in 3 amendments, I take it from Senator Lummis, that you originally ruled out because it will be more convenient because somebody gets a vote. You just said, as we started this, the rules are the rules, and that you're not going to pick and choose and say, oh, this is going to help that one along, or it's going to help that one along, that you were going to apply the rules across the board. I came in here with one set of rules and understood that that was the case. So if you're now going to rule arbitrarily that you've picked 3 out of the basket to add back in, 3 Republican amendments to add back in, then I think you should rule that all of the amendments are back in. We'd like all of the Democratic amendments back in. And I am particularly looking at Cortez Masto, number 16. This is an amendment that was requested by the National Sheriff's Association. It would close a massive loophole in the current bill that would make it, right now the current bill makes it harder for law enforcement to go after cartels and criminals that are using decentralized platforms to launder money. Or how about we do Reed-Smith, number 95, for example. That's the amendment that would prevent deposit flight from community banks, which Republicans are clearly afraid to vote on. So it seems to me, Mr. Chairman, following the rules you announced at the beginning, either we know all the amendments when we walk in and that's the end of it, or if you're going to start opening that up, let's open it up to everyone, not just 3 amendments on the Republican side.
Actually, the amendment that we just voted on, number 79, was not agreed to as well. We substituted it based on the request of Alston Brooks to allow you to have that amendment, and I did so. And as you said at the beginning of this hearing, that I have the right as the chairman to pick and choose which amendments we wanted, and based on a bipartisan, which I'm not choosing between Republicans and Democrats, I'm actually choosing for Republicans and Democrats to have these final amendments in order.
You know, with respect, Mr. Chairman, you didn't say to me that if Alston Brooks wanted to yield her spot over for me to add another amendment, the consequence would be that Lummis would suddenly get 3 amendments that had been ruled that they would not be held and they would be out of order? I just don't understand this process.
This is a Wikipedia definition of no good deed goes unpunished. These were bipartisan bills. So, Mr. Chair, maybe instead of considering them here today with the ranking member's objections, can we just get an agreement that they'd be baked into a manager's amendment on the floor?
Yes.
No.
Good. Okay.
I think,
Point of order, yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman,
Last comment on the left. We'll go to closing remarks. Yes.
I would actually prefer, because of the good faith that that Senator Lummis has shown, and I intend to work more on this bill, but I would hope this would move me much closer if these amendments are not put off till the floor.
Then I clearly withdraw my comment.
Yeah, point of order, Mr. Chair, just so I have clarification.
Certainly.
Because if you had included my number 16, I wouldn't be asking this question. But now I'm trying to understand. Originally, 16 was not allowed because it was ineligible based on a Scrivener's error. so were these others. But now, at the chairman's call and discretion, those are going to be allowed in, but this one not because it's still a scrivener's error? I'm confused.
Yeah,
why.
no,
Or is it just, and listen, I respect it, it's your call.
Yes.
If it's just that you want to let some in and some not, that's fine too. I respect that. I'm just trying to understand as we move forward.
Certainly, there's no doubt that this could be confusing to folks looking on. It's a simple, actual answer. We have an opportunity to do what I think is in America's best interest, is to show that when possible, both sides can find a path forward. And in my opinion, finding that path forward requires me to allow Lummis's amendments in because that was a request of Democrat members in order to get to a bipartisan coalition and solution. And so yeah, I have made the decision that treating both sides fairly requires me to listen to both sides. And now that there are both sides coming to the table, both asking me to make a decision to allow amendments in, it's incumbent upon me to make the right decision. In my opinion, making the right decision is to allow these amendments in. So we can either do it the way that Tillis has recommended, or we can do it the way that Warner recommended, but at the end of the day.
But let me suggest, obviously, the Democrats have not agreed to this. There may be a Democrat, there may be 3 Democrats who've agreed to
Yes.
this. But the Democrats have not agreed to this. Let me ask the question the other way around, because I know
Certainly.
you always want to be fair.
Yes.
You guys have the majority. You've voted out every single thing that the Democrats have tried to put in. What is the harm to letting us vote 2 more amendments that we wanted to vote, one that is supported by law enforcement and one that is supported by community banks? We're not here to try to make this a longer process. You still have all the votes. You can keep them out. But we'd at least like to have an opportunity to vote on these 2 amendments. And then, still an unusual process, but I would call it, you are trying to be fair here. Otherwise, you've just said, I'm going to pick the people who I think are going to put together the deal that is the deal you like. It's not the deal I like. And so either we get the same kind of parity, we get the same kind of courtesy afforded each other. We're just asking for 2 amendments. You're getting 3 here. And
Excellent.
let us vote on those 2. I don't know what the harm is of voting. You guys, we get it. You'll probably vote no. But you ought to at least have to hear it.
Actually, I think it's 4 or 5 amendments. But
I'm only asking 2.
I understand. I think the answer is a simple one again. About 11:05, we informed your team that there was a bipartisan coalition asking for more amendments that I had taken out. I decided to listen to the bipartisan conversation and come to the conclusion that it was worth moving on. And that is what I'm going to do. And with Senator Warner and other members of your side reinforcing my point, I think the best thing to do is to accept those amendments, hear them, and hear the rebuttals.
I just want to say I'm deeply concerned that law enforcement officials will listen to this and wonder why their point of view couldn't be heard. That community banks will listen to this and wonder why their point of view just couldn't be heard. That's all anyone's asking for. It's 2 minutes in order to get the amendment out, a minute by way of rebuttal, and we're done. But we came in here, lived with the fact that you said, sorry, can't do those, but part of your statement was, and sorry, there are Republican things we can't do as well. So the Democratic position, look, our position should be, it's all of them, but we're willing, I'm just going to say on behalf of my colleagues here, we're willing to settle just for these 2.
Let me tell you what this hearing was actually about, because it wasn't about amendments. It was about who the rules apply to. Senator Tim Scott opened this committee session with a very specific promise. He said 16 Democratic amendments had been cut, several Republican ones had been cut too, and that was final. He said, and I want to be precise here, the rules are the rules. I'm not picking and choosing. That is a direct quote from the chairman of this committee spoken at the start of this very hearing. 1 hour later, he picked and chose. 3 Republican amendments that had been ruled out of order, eliminated, done, off the table, were suddenly back in. Scott's explanation was that a bipartisan coalition had come to him, that a deal was forming, that he was simply responding to both sides. I want to stop right there because that explanation deserves to be held up to the light, because Senator Warren, who was sitting right there when this happened, immediately asked the single most important question in that room. She said, "If you are reopening this process for 3 Republican amendments, why not reopen it for ours?" And she wasn't asking for all 16 back. She named 2. The first was the Cortez Masto amendment, requested directly by the National Sheriff's Association, which would close a loophole that currently makes it harder for federal law enforcement to pursue cartels using decentralized crypto platforms to launder money. The second was the Reed-Smith amendment, which would prevent community banks from hemorrhaging deposits as a direct consequence of this bill. Law enforcement on one side, community banks on the other. These are not fringe constituencies. These are 2 of the most broadly popular groups in American politics, and both of them wanted a voice in this process. Warren asked for 2 minutes per amendment. She said, "You still have the votes to defeat them. You can keep them out. Just let us put them on the record first." Scott said no. Now I want you to sit with that for a moment because this is where the real story is. When you already have the votes to kill an amendment, when the outcome is not in any doubt whatsoever, the only possible reason to block it from even being voted on is to avoid the vote itself. Not the result, the vote. Because a vote on the record is a permanent thing. It means every senator in that room has to stand up and publicly declare yes or no in front of law enforcement groups, in front of community bankers, in front of every constituent who was watching. Blocking the vote does not protect the legislation. It protects the senators from having to answer for it. And that is not a procedural footnote. That is the entire mechanism of what happened in that room. Here is what made it worse. Scott kept reaching for the word bipartisan to describe what he was doing. I want to be direct about something. If 3 Republican amendments are restored on the basis of a bipartisan request, and the Democrats in that room are standing up on camera saying we did not agree to this, that word has lost its meaning. You cannot call something bipartisan while the other party is actively objecting to it in real time. Senator Cortez Masto made a point I don't want to let get buried here. She wasn't even asking for symmetry across all 16 amendments. She was asking for a coherent explanation of the standard being applied. Her amendment had been ruled ineligible due to a scrivener's error, a technical drafting mistake. The Republican amendments being brought back in had the same kind of issue. So what is the actual rule? What is the actual standard? And Scott never answered that question directly, because the honest answer is that the standard is not a standard at all. It is a preference. It is a result. It is whatever the chairman decides it is in the moment, for the reasons he decides in the moment, with no consistent principle underneath it. Now I want to acknowledge something real here. Committee chairmen do have broad discretionary authority over their proceedings. That is not controversial, and it is not unusual. What Scott did does not technically break a written rule. But what he did is more corrosive than breaking a rule. He opened this hearing by announcing neutrality, by publicly establishing the credibility of a fair process, and then he spent that credibility the moment it became politically convenient. He used the appearance of rule following to cover a process that had no consistent rules at all. And that matters way beyond this bill and this committee, because when the majority uses procedural language to dress up a partisan outcome, and then shields individual senators from going on the record about amendments backed by sheriffs and community bankers, that is not governing. That is insulation from accountability. Warren said something at the close of this exchange that I keep coming back to. She said law enforcement officials will watch this hearing and wonder why their voice couldn't get 2 minutes. That community bankers will watch it and wonder exactly the same thing. She's right. And the answer, the real answer, is that it was never about the time. It was about the record. Who gets to be on it, and who gets quietly protected from ever having to be. Democracy doesn't collapse in one dramatic moment that everyone notices. It gets managed, procedurally, one ruling at a time, until the system that was supposed to hold power accountable becomes the thing protecting power instead. What you saw in that room today was that process working exactly as designed, just not for you. If you want breakdowns that go past the surface of what's being said, subscribe. Because these are the moments that get called routine, and they are anything but.